Good afternoon, everyone. The DOGE Task Force will come to order, and we have a quorum. We have all of our task force members here today in person, so good to have everyone. Welcome to our next meeting of this task force. I just want to start off with a little opening remark here and address some of the things that we've received, in particular some of the comments from the portal. And I just want to explain a little bit about this task force and how we operate and maybe clear up some misunderstandings. So one of the comments we've received a few times kind of relates to, from the portal, a misunderstanding of how this task force works, and particularly the costs around it. So as legislators, we are on a fixed salary. So we are getting paid the same throughout the year, whether we do this task force or not. So there's no additional cost for having us legislators here. For our staff that works on it, which we're very grateful for, they're also a fixed salary throughout the year. So there's no additional cost for having them participate in this task force. And we've, I think, spent $0 to date, additional dollars on this task force. Now there might in the future may be a little bit of travel, but that'll be pretty minor. We've tried to use Zoom as much as possible. We haven't hired expensive consultants. So they're really, in terms of economic terms, there hasn't been a lot of marginal costs for the marginal benefit that this task force is expected to bring. So I just wanted to clear that up in terms of, wise use of taxpayer dollars, that we really aren't spending additional taxpayer funds to hold this task force, but we do expect to provide significant taxpayer savings as a result of this task force. So hopefully that clarifies that and addresses some of the comments that we've been receiving on the portal. With that, I'll ask my co-chair, Senator Lakey, any opening comments you'd like to give?
Mr. Chairman, no, I think I'm ready to get going. So,
okay, great. Well, the first thing we have as an action item are the minutes. Committee, those minutes were sent out earlier, and they are on the back of your agenda. The chair would entertain a motion, and since we're in the Senate, we're doing a second. So if we could have a motion and a second, Senator Semmelroth.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes from August 25th, 2025.
Thank you. And Senator Lakey seconds that motion. All right, committee, any discussion on the approval of the minutes? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the minutes from our meeting on August 25th, 2025. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by nay? Motion carries and the minutes are approved. Next up, we will have LSO with Paul Headley, our Deputy Director, and Elizabeth Bowen, our legal counsel, present on the Idaho Code Cleanup Act. Just as preamble to this, committee members, each of you should have received an email with a little lengthy packet of some of the code cleanup sections that we're going to review today. There's been, so we passed House Bill 14 in the last session, directing agencies to look at areas of code particular to them that could be cleaned up. LSO received hundreds of submissions in response to that. We're not going to go over all hundreds of those today. LSO has selected a few for our review, and then we'll tackle the remainder throughout the upcoming meetings. So the idea here, and if you saw your email with this, the agency presents, which will have LSO do in a summary format, the section of code to be cleaned up. And then LSO provides some sort of historical background or reasons why, or the agency gave an explanation. And then there could be motions taken at the end here if we want to move some of these forward and take action. So with that, Mr. Headley, if you could introduce yourself for the record and make your presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Co-Chair Lakey, members of the task force. I'm Paul Headley with Legislative Services. And also with me is Elizabeth Bowen. And Mr. Bybee just let me know that we're not yet streaming. So we're looking into that at the moment.
Mr. Headley, maybe Mr. Bybee, is that a quick fix? Yeah, committee, let's go at ease. I think for the public interest, I would like this broadcast. So we'll be at ease.
Recording in progress.
The task force will come back to order. Apologies for that. We're having streaming difficulties. Apparently, it's a third-party streaming service. Neither IPPTV or LSO is at fault here. So it's just a challenge. There's a notice up on the website. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the website after, so anybody that misses out in the live session can watch it later. I'm also trying to get the Zoom link out. If you have anybody asking you, feel free to share the Zoom link, and they can log into Zoom and watch it via Zoom. With that, Mr. Headley, welcome back, and let's get moving forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Co-Chair Lakey, and members of the task force. I'm Paul Headley with Legislative Services Office, and also with me is Miss Elizabeth Bowen. We are here to present information on the work that LSO has done on the Idaho Code Cleanup Act and information submitted to this task force for consideration. This act is found in Title 67, Chapter 37 of Idaho Code, and was a result of the passage of House Bill 14 during last session. A brief overview of the act is that it required agencies to review their statutes for obsolete, outdated, or unnecessary chapters, sections, or subsections that can be removed from the Idaho Code. LSO was required to create a portal for submission, and agencies were to submit their requests through that portal. Now, the key provision of this act is that it's for the removal of chapters, sections, or subsections. Any requests for changing or modifying language would not meet the provisions of this chapter. So any request to change language is not part of this. It's just strictly to remove or repeal those sections. So the work that LSO has done so far, we built the portal. Agencies and the Division of Financial Management have submitted numerous sections for review, and we've developed our internal process to review these requests, to do it systematically. We're looking at statutory history, other statutory references. We're looking at potential budgetary impacts and any unintended consequences from repeal of any of the sections. So this process takes a little bit of time. It's not something we just want to spot check and move along. So while we are doing our due diligence, we are going to prioritize those sections that we can, those requests that we can move to this committee that are relatively straightforward. So the task force prioritize those for the task force, and anything that requires more analysis kind of put to the side and come back to that afterwards. So far, our staff have sent this task force 28 requests that we have reviewed, and of those 28, 20 are we're recommending are ready to move forward for drafting. And Jen, if you could bring that up on the screen. So, Mr. Chairman, on the screen are 20 sections of code that have been submitted that we believe are ready, that could be moved on for bill drafting. There are also 5 that are recommended to be returned to the agencies for alternative bill drafting approaches. One of those, Division of Veteran Services, has requested that theirs be pulled back after further review. And then 3 of those 28, we're holding those for further clarification with the agencies. So regardless of which sections move forward, all of them will still go through the regular bill drafting process for germane committee consideration. So Elizabeth, did I miss anything, or would you care to add any comments?
Paul, Mr. Chairman, Co-Chair, Task Force, I will refrain from commenting unless you have any questions about the specific sections that are up for furtherance.
Okay, committee members, any questions? Representative Tanner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hadley, so just curious, I mean, I think this is making a step in the right direction, but do you know if there's any FTP cuts that are going to happen within this, any regulations that are going to be eliminated, so again, less of a burden, or is this just going to be just some basic little tiny things kind of here and there getting cleaned up from agencies?
Mr. Headley?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Tanner, most of this is focused on obsolete, outdated provisions of code, programs that no longer exist, or a program that, or for a time period, for example, an agency could not promulgate rules for 1 year, and that was 1953 or something like that. So that's the nature of this. If there are FTP or issues like that, we will note that in the reviews that we do.
Yeah, okay. Representative Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Headley. So where can we go view these at? Do we just have to come talk to you guys about it, or are they posted somewhere? Oh,
Mr. Headley?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Scott, LSO staff will be providing these to you. I think it's been on a weekly schedule. So through your email, as we review these, we'll get them out to you.
Yeah, thank you for that, committee. I think the email was sent, the most recent one, sometime Thursday, called Code Cleanup Packet, which has the specifics about each one of these. And as listed on the screen, is that just the summary, A and B?
Mr. Chairman, on the screen, these are the 5 that we're recommending be returned back to the agency for maybe a different bill drafting process. So the first page was the 20 that we believe could move forward. These we recommend going back to the agency.
Okay, thank you. Committee, is there any questions on any of these specific ones, either on the first page that we feel are ready to advance, or the second page to return to the agencies? I believe we do have some of the agency representatives here in the room with us to ask specific questions if we have any of those. Senator Blaylock.
Thank you, Chairman. I just had one question for the Department of Lands ones. It looks like they're getting rid of timber floating laws. I just was curious why section 808 and 809 that also talk about timber floating weren't included in the chapters to be repealed.
Mr. Headley, would you like to address that, or would you like to call up someone?
Mr. Chairman and Senator, I do not believe that the Department of Lands has an individual here today to address that.
I believe they were the one organization that let us know they wouldn't be in attendance today, and that's the question that we have. Ms. Bowen?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Blaylock, I believe Mr. Tatro did get in touch with the Department of Lands and ask them that very question. I don't know if he got a response, and unfortunately he's traveling today, or else I would give him a call.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Representative Tanner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm curious if any agencies actually did not respond back to this at all from your guys' requests. And if so, maybe which ones?
Okay, Mr. Headley?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Tanner, to our knowledge, all the agencies have responded. Some responded through the portal. Most of them responded through the Division of Financial Management provided information. So we believe all the agencies are covered.
And Mr. Headley, just as a follow-up, did some agencies submit no recommended changes? Is that correct? Or did they all have some portion to be corrected?
Mr. Chairman, some agencies did respond with no recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Representative Tanner?
Yeah, just one quick follow-up.
Go ahead.
I just was going to see, based on what was actually put in the statement of purpose for this, the original bill that you had mentioned, House Bill 14, it talks about unnecessary bureaucracy, ineffective spending and regulations at the federal level as well, that programs that we currently have in place. I was just curious if you could go ahead and send an email out to all the agencies going, I appreciate that you guys are doing some cleanup of your things, but one of the things that we were actually looking for in this was the inefficiency and bureaucracy. And we know that's something that's actually out there, and we run into that quite a bit, especially in JFAC. We get to see that firsthand, as well as the ineffectiveness of spending, as well as regulatory regulations that are overburdensome in general. That would be a lot of it. I think there's a lot of different things that we can actually clean up. So if you could send an email out to them saying, this is kind of what we were looking for. We appreciate you guys going this far, but this is one of the areas that we were really trying to get to. I think that'd be helpful for this committee.
Mr. Headley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the focus of this section of code, or this act, is looking at obsolete, outdated, and unnecessary sections. And there is a section here, subsection B, 3B, any additional information about sections of code regarding public health, safety, and welfare that could be more clear and concise. That was part of the request. The agencies had the ability to respond to that. So we will look through those submissions for that type of information, but we can certainly try and reach back out to the agencies.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the task force? So one of the things we could do, and the chair would be prepared to entertain separate motions. I also provided some written language here if we want to move forward any on attachment 1 that we're ready. We could move it as a whole group, or if we aren't comfortable with some of those, for example, if we still have questions from Department of Lands that are unanswered, we could hold those. And then attachment 2, we could do a separate motion to return to agency and seek additional information. So, task force members, how would you like to proceed with these two different attachments? And once again, as a reminder, we'll be addressing these every committee meeting. Like I said, there's lots more to go through. So we'll have a chance to either bring these back up or look at others. Senator Lakey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did kind of look at the list, and then also Senator Blaylock brought up 38, 808, and 809. And I went and took a look at those. I think we can add those if need be, but what I noticed there was that some of it deals with log identification and brands without necessarily being limited to floating logs. So maybe there's some application there. And then in 809, it talked about either floating transport or land transport. So those may be more in the category of amendment versus full-on repeal. But I think we can talk with the Department of Lands about whether we need to add those or not later. But I'd be supportive of sending all of these on toward the repeal, and would make a motion to that effect in attachment 1, send it to LSO for drafting of legislation for repeal.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Senator Berkey seconds that motion. Committee, any discussion on this motion just for Amendment 1 to send forward to LSO to begin the bill drafting process? All right. Seeing no discussion, those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by nay? Motion carries, and we will send those forward. Any action that the members want to take in terms of attachment 2, which has been noted as possibly returning back to the agency?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Bowen?
And I am happy if the task force has any questions about why the recommendation is to return these to the agency. I'm happy to address that.
Okay. Any questions? Representative Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm in the right section here. So the Idaho State Police one, 372743. And it's saying that this is obsolete and should be repealed because the Idaho Supreme Court has ruled that arresting individuals for misdemeanors. I sure don't like the direction this is going, where the executive branch is going to start, doing things because the Supreme Court ruled in a way and not without the legislature looking at it. So I just want to, I don't think I'd be comfortable. I'd want discussions on that, not just a full repeal, and look into that. It's a little deeper than just it's obsolete. So anytime that the courts are doing a ruling and then the executive branch is deciding they're going to remove parts of law because of that, I think is a problem.
Ms. Bowen, would you like to address that?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and Representative Scott. And that is actually exactly why our recommendation is to return it to the agency for further consideration. That same Idaho Supreme Court case is also behind their recommendations to repeal 49-1405 and 49-1408. And in one of those sections, it's actually the first one you identified, the 372704. It's only subsection 3 that would have changes in it, I believe. But essentially what we thought is it's when the recommendation is to make changes to the law based on a court opinion. That is something that we believe requires more scrutiny than the code cleanup is intended for. And so our belief is that it would be more appropriate to deal with recommendations for how to treat that court opinion and how to change the law based on it. We think that's best handled in a separate bill on that specific subject.
And so, Ms. Bowen, maybe just clarify the task force. As I understand, this second list, this attachment 2, are ones we're essentially saying we're rejecting right now, kind of like rules. We're not going to go with those. We're going to send it back to the agency. So by making a motion like this, we would say we're returning that to agency. That legislature is not going to act and agree with that at this time.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Further questions from the task force, or the chair would entertain a motion to that nature of returning these specific ones on attachment 2 back to the agency. Representative Scott.
I make a motion to send, do I need to list them?
Just say attachment 2, or those listed in attachment 2. Yeah.
Those listed in attachment 2 back to the agencies.
Okay. Second for that one? Second. Senator Simulroth seconds that. Committee members, any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, those in favor of the motion to send these subsections listed in section 2 to return to the agency signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by nay? Motion carries, and we will do that. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll look for future ones of code cleanup coming to us. All right, next up, Mr. Keith Bybee from LSO is going to give us an update on the budget and specifically vacant FTPs and the governor's budget holdbacks. So, Mr. Bybee, if you could introduce yourself for the record, make a presentation. And committee members, I believe we also have a handout or two from Mr. Bybee in your packet. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Keith Bybee. I am the division manager of the Budget and Policy Analysis Division for Legislative Services Office. So, as the chairman described, I have actually 3 handouts that the committee members should have. And you get a little bit of a bonus handout, which is not about bonuses, but about the unallocated CEC. But I'll talk about that each in their turn. So on the screen and everybody's handout, the first one we're going to look at is the one titled 5-Year Average FTP from 2020 to 2024 and positions vacant for 6 months plus, or 6 months and longer. So it's the one that has the zebra stripes on it on plain white background. So let's have me walk you through this report first and foremost. So some of the information that you see on here is related to the presentation I gave to the committee back in August. And so if we look at the very top row for the Attorney General's office, what you see there is the average authorized FTP for that 5-year period was 221.42. Filled positions were at almost 94%, which translates to an average vacancy rate of 13.42 positions. So I'm working from left to right across the screen. The additional information that we provided, which we have now grabbed from all of the budget submissions, was part of this year's budget submission, which is new to the process, that required agencies to identify any position that has been vacant since before January the 1st. So this would be 6 months and longer is the way this is coming across to us. And so what you can see is that in the Office of the Attorney General, they have 9 positions that were vacant going back to January the 1st here. And so this is more of these long time chronically vacant positions is what we're talking about. On Friday, the chairman talked about a number that was 87, I believe. The actual total amount from this report is 439. So if you flip to page 3, we've done some totals on the back for you there. And effectively, this just follows the same format as the original presentation I gave to you. So if you can walk through and find everybody's favorite agency in there and identify what their average filled rate was, and then compare that to long-term vacant positions in order to kind of get a feel for which positions might be available for this committee to make recommendations about to JFAC and the entire legislature. One thing that I should note before I pause for any questions about this report is that we haven't identified whether or not these positions have dollars attached to them. And what I mean by that is that the agencies could have positions on the HR system that have been authorized at one point in the time, but they've just never been filled, or they were filled at one point and they have used those salaries to provide increases to other employees or redirected those salaries somewhere else. And so that's the next thing that we'll be working on over the course of the fall, is trying to identify how many dollars are attached to these 439 positions right now. Okay. That's basically how this report is working. I would be happy to answer any questions about the vacancy report.
Thank you, Mr. Bybee. I'm going to pause for a second to give an update on technology from Idaho Public Television. They seem to have found a way to reroute the stream through the other room, West Wing 54. We're currently in 55. So if you're pulling it up to watch it on the original link, it redirects you to the other room, 54, and you can watch it there. So we do have a stream going on, just a little few steps to get there. So there we go. We're streaming. We're back. Mr. Bybee, I do have a question for you. Maybe you could help me understand and dive into a little more detail about the report we saw from DFM. I think it was reversions of FTPs getting back to about 86 or 87. And where did that number differ here from this 439 that your report is showing? Maybe you can explain like the differences of what one's looking at versus the other.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I actually don't know much about that report that DFM gave to you, and I do apologize. I didn't have a chance to look at it, and I'm not sure that I even have it. So I'm not exactly, I can't speak to the veracity of their report, but this is what we requested from the agencies to submit as part of their budget submission this year.
Okay, thank you. Senator Samaroff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bybee, regarding the 6-month cutoff in your analysis, where did that number come from?
Mr. Bybee?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Summerall, thank you for that question. So there's a little bit of historical context around that 6-month, going back to January the 1st, actually, is that the way that the previous system, STARS and the employment information system for how we manage payroll, when positions were vacant for longer than 6 months, they would automatically fall off that system. But with the new updated LUMA, as I understand it, is that positions can live forever. And so that's why we picked that January 1st date to really start to get some cleaning up of the data that is sitting on LUMA.
Follow up?
Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, Mr. Bybee, regarding the next level of analysis that you said your office would be able to do in terms of the whys around some of these vacancies, will you consider failed searches, leadership transitions, staff turnover, and how that could impact that 6-month timeline? Because that's actually a short window when it comes to state government sometimes.
Mr. Bybee?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Summerall, absolutely. I think that's the first question that we usually ask around those is that, are there dollars left attached to these positions? And if the answer is no, then we know that they're just positions that can be scraped from the system. If the answer is yes, then that's the follow-up question. The example for going back a long time when the Department of Insurance was looking for an actuary position. That is a routinely hard position to fill. Actuaries have a lot of training and private wages usually exceed a state salary by a significant amount. And so there were almost 18 months before they were able to fill that position. So we do go through that stuff.
Thank you. Senator Lakey?
Thank you, Co-Chair. Mr. Bybee, so I think you answered my question on the first portion once we identify whether there's funding there. Could we also get a report or a supplement on what exactly those positions are, what the 9 positions are, for example, in the AG's office and so on, so we can kind of know roughly how they're described, what we're talking about?
Mr. Bybee?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and Chairman Lakey, thank you. I'll make a note of that, and we'll follow up the types of positions and start to identify those ones for you, okay?
Thank you. Representative Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bybee, not to pick on the Idaho Public Television, but it's an anomaly. It's different than everything else. 168%. Average vacant minus 32. Can you explain what that means?
Mr. Bybee?
Thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Chairman and Representative Scott. So anomaly is the best way to describe it, actually. Idaho Public Television for, I don't remember how long, but 2 to 3 years ago, their Friends for Public TV account, so that is a specific funding source for Idaho Public Television, JFAC and the legislature chose to pull those positions and the associated dollars off budget. So they are now belong in a continuously appropriated cap and accounting structure there. And so what you're seeing is when you're averaging out 5 years of history, so at one point they had, let's just pick a number, so if they had 50 FTP at Idaho Public Television for 3 of those years, and then the last 2 they are down to 13 as established on Idaho code. So that's why you have this large variance or anomaly. And so you have a minus 32 there, effectively because they had more positions established that were filled over that period than they actually have on average as that average starts to wind down. Complicated answer, sorry about that.
Thank you. Representative Tanner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bybee, this isn't exactly on your sheet, but this is on FTP. One of my issues, and I started looking into it, I'm sure you're aware of it, so we have some statutory aspects to limit on bonuses, what they can actually just give out on bonuses. But one of the ways I found out that they're actually getting away with this is they're using it as a short-term merit aspect. I'm just curious if LSO, if you guys could actually put something together so we could get something drafted for closing that loophole on that short-term merit, because we're trying to, again, we create something, they create a loophole around it, just close another one of their doors.
Mr. Bybee.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Tanner, absolutely. In fact, that is some of the information that the LSO analyst presents during the CEC meeting is short-term merit increases as part of looking at a total compensation package. So I'll put together that report as well, okay?
Okay. Thank you. Senator Lickey.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Mr. Bybee, could you explain, just for the record, you've got a couple of categories that are non-applicable. That could be a timing thing. It could be a, authority. But could you just note that and explain that for the Public Defender's Office and then the universities?
Mr. Bybee.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chairman, thank you for that question. So specifically for the Office of the State Public Defender, there were not 5 years of history there. They're a brand new agency, and so that's why we're showing the average percentage of FTP filled compared there, but we just don't have the data to support that calculation on that one. But you can see that their current authorized level is 333, almost 334 positions, and 15 of those have been vacant since before January the 1st. For the college and universities, again, they don't have a specific full-time equivalent position cap as authorized in the appropriations bills. For college and universities, this is more of a bookkeeping exercise that comes from our longitudinal data system that keeps track of historical budget information, including actual expenditures, the agency requests, the governor's recommendation, and the action that JFAC took. And so once upon a time, that there was an exercise conducted to try and decipher how many authorized FTP would equate to a full-time equivalent position under state vernacular for things like professors, right? So if you're a tenured professor, and I think the formula they came up with back before I started, so more than 20 years ago, was that they thought that an FTP, like a tenured professor, would be about a 0.75 FTP. I think that there's going to be some discussion around that. And so that's why we're showing the data as non-applicable here, is that this is just kind of a bookkeeping measure to really identify how large the workforce could be at the college universities area.
Do you have additional questions or follow-up?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, committee, any further comments? Mr. Bybee, I guess maybe just going forward, or did you have any additional things you wanted to go over as part of your presentation?
For this report, no. So
okay.
Thank you very much.
So I think committee with FTPs in particular, Mr. Bybee has his homework for some of these data requests. We'd like to see some more details, some specifics on that, which hopefully you can provide to us before our next meeting so we can dive into it the next meeting. Co-Chair Lakey and I have been invited to present to JFAC's interim meeting in early November. And since, and several of you are on JFAC here, since JFAC does the appropriations and the authorization for FTPs, I think the appropriate route is we have some sort of DOGE Task Force recommendation around these FTPs to be reduced. And hopefully at our next meeting in October, we can come forward with a recommendation based on this additional data of what we would recommend. And then the co-chair and I can take that to JFAC and present it as sort of our results or our report of what we see. So, and then if there's additional policies, such as what Representative Tanner was discussing, that wouldn't go through JFAC, could go through a policy committee, we could, in the next couple months, bring those forward as well, not necessarily through JFAC, but through this task force, and have our recommendation, if the task force so desires, on some sort of policy level as well. And then we could bring those in the session. So, Representative Tanner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since you are talking about that, one of the things I've actually done is I wanted to get some of the detail, and I asked Director Bailey with the Department of Admin to provide, to see if he could actually get the data from actually badging in, so we could actually see who's actually showing up, what percentage of their group is actually showing up. What we had found out is they really can't get the data. The data they have is not very good. even though I think most of our agencies do have badging in set up. There are a few out there at the campus on Chinden that aren't. But I do think that would be something that either we have LSO look into or we direct the Department of Admin to look into, is how can we actually get the data? How can we actually see who's actually showing up? Do we actually have these positions that we're paying that aren't really even showing up for work? Part of it is we don't know unless you go out to the Chinden campus, which I've done multiple times, and there are entire areas that are empty with only a few people in them, and yet they're fully staffed. I don't know if that is a work from home aspect. I don't know if just happened to be the day I showed up is the day that they all decided to be sick. I don't know what actually went on, but I think there are ways and that we should be able to get that data, and I think that'll help us thread some of this needles of analyzing some of this FTP and different programs. So,
Okay, yeah, thank you. And maybe we can get that written up in a way we can request it through LSO and have them go through each agency, see. And I think relating to the work from home, we will be hearing shortly from Department of Human Resources on that as well. So we have that next on our agenda. Okay, Mr. Bybee, anything else? So I think that covers FTPs. Did you want to go over your next handouts that we had?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the next handout that we'll go over is the governor's 3% holdback. Effectively, this is just a report coming right out of the database, broken down by each budgeted agency. And so what you're going to see right at the top is that the governor's executive order exempted public schools from participating in that holdback. And so that's why you'll see zeros under that category. And so just a little bit more about this, more into the JFAC vernacular. Usually we do things on kind of rounded up numbers between the general fund, dedicated funds, and the federal fund source. And so this fund source is focusing specifically on the 3% holdback, which is only affecting general fund agencies. So the ITDs of the world, they would not be impacted by that 3% holdback in order to get there, with one exception. And that exception you can find, well, actually, pardon me, two exceptions. Those exceptions you'll find on the third page under the Office of the Governor. So I'm going to wait till Jen, my colleague, rolls down through there. The first one is on the military division line. Effectively, what you're seeing there on the holdback is that with the general fund reduction, they would have to also reduce federal spending from that account, and also their dedicated funds that are they effectively share fund sources among those on the military division. But the second one down there is from the Workforce Development Council. Specifically, this is from the In-Demand Careers Fund, and what we'll see here is a reduction of $2.25 million from the In-Demand Careers Fund, which funds the launch program, the Idaho launch program. And so this was part of the governor's holdback request, inclusive of that. So if you look down at the bottom of this report, you see the report totals coming back at $78.7 million from the general fund, $2,268,900 from dedicated funds, for a total of $81,241,500. Now, I understand the request from the governor's office and from the Workforce Development Council is to transfer cash that is in the In-Demand Careers Fund to the general fund to help stabilize the projected budget deficit that we have currently in fiscal year 2026. So that's what you're seeing on this report here. And I've identified the amounts by agency for the committee's viewing pleasure. But maybe this is a good place to stop and answer any questions.
All right, committee members, any additional questions here for Mr. Bybee? Representative Tanner. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bybee, since you brought up launch, one of the things that I've been actually trying to dig into is one, we're setting how many people are actually going on to launch. We kind of get that idea of what people qualify, but what we're not seeing is how many people do not show up at the fall semester, how many people didn't actually meet the grade aspects, how many people aren't using that program. From what I'm gathering in the information that I've been able to find, we're looking at another 30 million. Is that something that we can kind of project, or is there something we can do statutorily, or is there something we can do to make sure that money just comes right back automatically instead of a transfer aspect that happens?
Mr. Bybee?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Tanner, I'll start with your last question, which is, can we set up something in statute to move cash back into the general fund without it? It would, of course, take a piece of legislation to change that says something to the effect that the In-Demand Careers Fund will revert any fund balance at the end of the year to the general fund. I'm riffing here, so please forgive me, but we could write something like that as the legislative branch to collect it all back into there. So yes, there are options to do that, and I think that you'd want to work with your bill drafters in order to get that language correct. But that's one strategy you could take. Now, if we look at data from last year, so fiscal year 2025 was the first year of existence. The total authorization from the Workforce Development Council under trustee and benefit payments, so that would be the amounts that would go out for launch grants. The authorization from the legislature was $70,861,700. Of that amount, only $22,048,400 was expended in the last fiscal year. So that meant, and what happened is JFAC gave them reappropriation authority, and so they carried over $48.8 million from fiscal year 2025 into 2026. Now that cash is in the fund. That is driven by Section 633638 Idaho Code that deposits $80 million from sales tax into the In-Demand Careers Fund. And so that cash will remain in the fund. And just for this committee's understanding, one of the ways that they may be trying to cash flow that is if they identify someone that is eligible for the grants, no more than half the grant can be spent in any one academic year, unless it's a one-year program. So if it's a one-year welding certificate, then you're eligible for the full $8,000 spend. But if you're in a nursing program, for instance, on the in-demand careers, you'd only be spending $4,000 per year per student. And so they may be trying to cash flow it that way, but I think we need to find out and see what the details are as far as what their plans are for cash flow, because that's a significant amount of money.
Okay, thank you. Follow up?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bybee, yeah, if you could just follow up and provide this committee with some of those numbers, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bybee, so it's 3% cutback for everybody, right? So there's some agencies 0. Can you explain that?
Mr. Bybee.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Scott. So let's highlight back to the first page, career technical education. So for career and career technical education, there could be two explanations here. And the first explanation is a little bit complicated, but I'll walk you through it anyway. So part of the appropriation for career technical education is...
Let me save you some time.
Sorry,
if I may.
go ahead, Representative Scott.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Do you have a
Bybee.
specific one you want to look at?
Yeah,
All
well,
right.
I just want to save you a little bit of time, because I understand education, the Board of Education, those are all under that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I understand there's some zeros, but overall, the State Board of Education has cut something, but there's some that have 0, like Fish and Game, Department of Finance, PUC, Secretary of State. Those are the ones I'm wondering about that have nothing.
Okay.
I understand there's maybe some within an agency, but.
Okay, Mr. Bybee, if you could respond to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Scott, thanks for the guidance on that one. So let's talk about the examples that you gave. So the Department of Fish and Game does not have any general fund in their budget. And so because the holdback was directed only at general fund agencies, they wouldn't be participating in the holdback on that one. Similarly, the Department of Finance, Department of Insurance, Public Utilities Commission. Now, if you go further down the page to the Office of the Secretary of State or the Attorney General, those are two agencies that are choosing not to participate right now. They did not submit that paperwork, so they may be considering it, but they're so far that's what we have in our budget document. They do have a general fund, of course, that support their operations.
Okay. And the deadline was part of the general budget submission deadline. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that was due September the 1st. That's
September
correct.
1st. Okay. All right. Representative Tanner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bybee, when we're looking at schools, obviously they're zeroed out. We know the governor actually did not include them in the 3% holdback. I'm just curious, going through their submission that was actually done, were there actually any cuts that they were actually looking at doing? Because what my numbers are telling me from what I'm looking at is we have a decline population in Boise and West Ada. Both those two are the largest cost drivers and the largest population of students out there. So when we are seeing a decline in this, I mean, just based on the funding formula mechanism, we should see a decrease. Is that what you're seeing with what they're submitting, or are they trying to project that we're actually going to be up even though we're not?
Mr. Bybee?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Tanner, the current budget projection for the public school support program, they're projecting 160 additional support units in fiscal year 2027 as part of their budget submission. I think that they have a couple of points in the year where they're required to submit in data for what average daily attendance actually was, and we don't have that report yet. So that was based on that it was a 1% increase of support units at 160. So that's why you wouldn't see any decreases in the current year budget or in the out year budget. Now, as we go through the process, just like we did last year, JFAC may have additional information to reduce the amount of support units in the current year. And just at a really high level for this committee, for public school support, if the legislature chose not to carve out money from public school support, what would happen is any overage in the budget that would flow into the Public Education Stabilization Fund. Whereas if they actually had more support units necessary to run their budget, there could be a draw on Public Education Stabilization Fund, or PSIF. And so it kind of works as that overdraft protection. That's how that stabilization fund works.
Okay. We're going to have to keep moving here because we are behind with our technology delay. I just want to point out one thing, and Mr. Bybee maybe can correct me on my math if I'm wrong, and maybe I have a chance to do this. But I looked at, so the total general fund holdback here is about $78.7 million. If you look at, say, fiscal year 25, general fund was close to $5.3 billion. So if I do the math right, that's 1.5% holdback. So even though it's a 3% holdback because of the public schools being exempt and some of these other zero submissions we've seen, it turns out to be 1.5%. Have you had a chance to do that math, or is that?
Mr. Chairman, that's pretty good math.
Okay.
I haven't done that math specifically, but that's about right. Public schools takes up about half of our general fund budget, so yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right, let's go to your next handout then.
Thank you. Briefly, so the final handout that I have for you is the unallocated FY 2026 CEC. So these would be savings in addition to the 3% holdback. A little bit of background on this one. As part of the change in employee compensation negotiations, there was some very specific language in there that asked agencies to revert or to not spend any amount of the CEC that was unallocated after its initial implementation. And so what you're seeing is the impact of that. And if we can just hop down to the bottom of that page there, you see a total of $10.5 million of savings associated with that on the one-time budget, but only $441,800 on the general fund. So this is just a little bit of extra information for this committee as you're working through your process to just kind of understand where some of the moving parts are. So I'll go quick on this one just to get some time back.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Mr. Bybee, would you please repeat what you said about the CEC?
Too quick.
Mr. Bybee.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and Senator Semmelroth, I apologize. All right, so just to back up, the legislature provided probably the largest CEC ever to state government this past session for fiscal year 2026. But part of that negotiation in the clear language, the requirements of the language said that if an agency that implemented CEC on a $1.55 basis, but only gave most of their employees like a $1.05 increase, that difference needs to be reverted or unspent in the current fiscal year. The idea here is that you are capturing what unspent salary savings could be accumulated over that time.
Senator Blaylock.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the 3% cuts and then understanding this a little bit, when these departments were asked to make these cuts, is it, and I apologize, I maybe should know this, but is it like a straight 3% across the board, or are they really like digging in and figuring out where, what's being effective and what's not, what they can cut?
Mr. Bybee.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Blaylock, that's a great question. So I think the difference between the holdback plan and the ongoing plan are going to differ a lot between each agency. So what the agencies came up with to submit for their 3% holdback could be things like we have several positions vacant that we're going to hold vacant in order to accumulate that 3% of savings within our budget for this year. But on the ongoing impact, we actually need to hire that position, right? We can't go more than 6 months without hiring that position. And so their ongoing plan that they're working on submitting right now is probably going to look different than their current plan that's submitted. So the answer is they're spending a lot of time thinking about how they're going to generate those types of savings within their budget so that they could revert it back to the general fund. But there are going to be some differences between this one-time temporary reduction in spending versus that ongoing cut that the legislature will be considering in January.
Senator Blaylock.
One more follow-up. So the cuts that happened today, this temporary one before they maybe dig in and figure out what going forward they can cut, does it include salaries and benefits for state employees?
Mr. Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Blaylock. Yes, it will.
Okay. Follow up? Go ahead.
One more follow-up. Do you know if our elected officials, like our Attorney General, Secretary of State, did they take a 3% cut as well?
Mr. Bybee.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Blaylock, they did not submit a plan to us that suggested they were participating in this one-time temporary reduction in spending for the current year. And we'll see how that goes in the out year.
Yes,
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, is this an optional thing? I guess that's where I'm a little bit confused of.
Mr. Bybee.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Blaylock, in the governor's executive order, they specifically carve out the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the statewide constitutional officers, as well as public schools.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Bybee, for your presentation. Appreciate that. And we've given you some homework to do. So next up, we're going to discuss the work from home policy and telework policies. We have Janelle White with us from the Administrator for the Division of Human Resources. Ms. White, if you could introduce yourself for the record, please, and make your presentation. And I don't believe we have a handout on this one. Okay. So go ahead, Ms. White.
All right. Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Janelle White, and I am the administrator for the Idaho Division of Human Resources. I actually did provide a PowerPoint, but it didn't make it, so I'm happy to send it afterward if that's helpful.
Yeah, if you could afterward.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I am here to talk to you about telecommuting or the state's work from home policy. And before I get into that, what I wanted to talk about first briefly was giving some context behind why the state of Idaho offers telecommuting in the first place. So the kind of backdrop on that is the state of Idaho is an increasingly competitive labor market. So we have, as of about August of 2025, 0.8 unemployed individuals for every one job opening. So what that means is we have less people than we do jobs to put them in. And so with that sort of labor market that is so competitive, what that means is all the employers within Idaho are fighting for a very limited talent pool. And what that results in is higher wages, increased offerings of benefit packages, which includes telecommuting. So that's kind of the landscape in Idaho as far as the competition goes in our labor market. We also have a changing workforce. So within the next 15 years, we project that about 35% of our workforce will retire, and that will be replaced by the next generation of workers, which is our Gen Z, and they've grown up, of course, in a technology era, and they expect to be able to work from anywhere if they're able to. And then finally, the last piece of it that I think is important to think about when we're thinking about telecommuting policies is the state, our compensation philosophy is to offer a competitive compensation package to our employees. Currently, we're about 15% behind in base salary from other employers within Idaho. So that's just base salary. We're not even talking about other incentives that other employers might offer to their employees, such as performance bonuses. So with those things in mind, we have to be strategic in how we go about attracting and retaining talent within the state of Idaho. So one of the biggest disruptors, I would say, in government efficiency of any organization for that matter, is vacancies and turnover. Because when you have people who are leaving your organization regularly, you have to re-recruit, you have to retrain, you have to onboard, and that takes away from your ability to deliver core services to the citizens of Idaho. So instead of spending your time delivering services, you're hiring and training people. For the state, this last year, we experienced a 14.6% turnover rate, which the average of other employers was 13%. So we're above average there in terms of the amount of turnover we're experiencing. So we have more people who are leaving our jobs. And then in the last year, we experienced a vacancy rate of 11.2% as compared to other employers in Idaho, which was 4.6%. So we're having a hard time filling our jobs. So people are leaving, and we're having a hard time getting people to take state jobs. And ultimately, again, what that results in is disruption in the workplace that makes it difficult to deliver services. And because this is the Committee on Government Efficiency, I do have to throw in some positive stuff here, some things that are going well. So while our turnover is higher than average, in the last year, we did see a 4.6 reduction in our turnover rate. So even though it's still high, it's not as bad as it was. So it is getting better. And we also saw a 36% improvement in our time to fill statistics, which is really helpful as well. So to then kind of shift our conversation over into telecommuting, what's the state's policy on telecommuting? We define telecommuting as when we allow employees to regularly perform work outside of the traditional office setting. So this isn't going to include employees whose primary duties are already away from the office. So we don't include troopers, park rangers, building inspectors, right? Those aren't considered telecommuters. Those are just employees who have jobs that are outside of an office setting. Instead, we're talking about the employees when we're talking about telecommuting who would normally work in an office setting, such as administrative professional roles, IT, policy, research, and some of our customer service roles. In state government, we have a lot of positions based on their job duties who aren't able to telecommute at all. So correctional officers, firefighters, law enforcement, maintenance, direct care providers. The state's policy on telecommuting is that no more than 20% of agency staff may telecommute on any given day. So that policy, that percentage limitation took effect in roughly May of 2024. Prior to that, it was open to agency discretion to determine what fit best for their workforce in terms of the amount of telecommuting that they allowed. So that change took place a year and a half ago. And then we do have kind of an exemption to that cap, which is for individuals who live in our rural communities. And what we're trying to address with that is, number one, being strategic about expanding our pool of candidates to those who live in rural communities, especially as we think about the competitiveness of our labor force, but then also trying to provide good job opportunities to those who live in rural communities who may not otherwise have an opportunity to apply for a state position. So that 20% cap doesn't apply to individuals who live in rural communities. And then I have a lovely chart that I would show you if you guys had my PowerPoint, but it is a chart that shows the actual utilization of telecommuting. So we have a telecommuting time code that we have state employees utilize anytime they are telecommuting in accordance with this policy. And so it dates back to about January of 23 and then comes current. And on the chart, what you would see is that the average telecommuting by month kind of peaked around 14% in the spring of 23. And to date, we're at about 4.5% of our state employees who are telecommuting on average in a given month. Now, it's going to vary department by department, but that's at least an overall monthly average. So within our telecommuting policy that we provide to state employees, we make it very clear that telecommuting is a privilege. It's not a right. It's at the discretion of the agency head, may be ended at any time, and can be for any variety of reasons, whether that's just organizational needs, performance. If there was some kind of policy violation, then the state has the right to opt out of that telecommuting agreement. In order for state employees to telecommute, they have to have an achieved performance appraisal. So they have to be meeting performance expectations on a regular basis in order to be eligible to do that. Their position and duties have to, of course, be suitable for telecommuting. They have to attend training. They have to get approved. And then it's reviewed annually with their performance approval process, or performance appraisal process, sorry. And then for any of our telecommuting employees, we expect them to follow the same standards of conduct that we would any other state employee. So you have to follow the policies, you have to follow the rules, you have to follow the laws, you have to conduct yourself in a professional manner, you need to promote responsible government, you need to show good customer service, and then agencies are required to set and evaluate clear performance goals to ensure that these standards are being met. Employees have to be available during work hours, and a few other things as outlined in the policy. And then as far as oversight and accountability goes for this policy, so all of our state agencies are responsible for implementing it, monitoring it, and ensuring compliance with the policy. And with that, I am happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. White. Committee members, any questions? Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ms. White. Thank you for the presentation. Can you tell me which sector maybe does more telecommuting than the others? Is it like health and welfare or transportation, or is it just random?
Ms. White?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Representative Scott. So in the data from what I've seen, I think one of the state agencies that has embraced telecommuting, I think much more than many of our other state agencies, is certainly the Department of Health and Welfare. And I think a lot of that kind of ties back to COVID, and I think trying to lead from a kind of social distancing standpoint and set a standard in that way. So they are one who has historically been more supportive of telecommuting than maybe some of our other state agencies. Yeah.
Thank you. Senator Berkey?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Ms. White, have things changed a little bit when we talk about quantifying the delegation aspect and the oversight of that employee? Is there a percentage of give and take associated with that, and are there some managers and supervisors that don't really welcome the whole idea of telecommuting?
Ms. White?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Senator Berkey, hopefully I got that close. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree with your sentiment there that it is a variety of leadership philosophies when it comes to telecommuting. We have certain managers who don't support it. They don't want to have employees telecommuting and would prefer to have them there in the office, whereas we've got others who are much more supportive of the practice. And I think ultimately that's why we have the policy in place. We set the standards and we try to have some consistency there to evaluate what are we telecommuting based on? Is it, job duties? Is their role a good fit for that? Is their performance a good fit for that? And then also the discretion of that agency head as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I actually have a couple questions for you. If I heard right, I think you said there's a 12% sort of cap on telecomute. Is that number accurate? 20?
20, sorry. If I
Excuse
said
me,
12.
20. Okay. Yeah. Is there any consequence if an agency exceeds that?
So, Mr. Chairman, we receive a report on telecommuting percentages every single pay period. And if an agency were to exceed that 20% cap, at this point, really the consequence is I give them a call and see what's going on. And what has generally been the situation is a miscommunication within their office and their employees and who's commuting on what day. So,
Okay.
and so by the next report, I see that it's been fixed.
Okay.
Yep.
It sounds like it's hypothetical or a rare occurrence?
I mean, yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, it's happened, but I would say it's rare.
Okay.
I think I have maybe 1-2 agencies that pop up every now and again.
Okay.
And generally, it's the small ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, is there any policy around, do you need to be an Idaho resident or citizen to work? I guess I'm thinking of a situation where you live in another state and you're just permanently teleworking or working from home.
Yeah, great question. So our standard is you have to be living in Idaho to telecommute for the state of Idaho. We do have a few exceptions to that we have approved, and it is kind of a cumbersome process that individuals have to go through in order to get that exception. But they are generally for positions where we could not likely refill that position if that person left. So we have some jobs that are really unique, really just specific to the state. So we have one where it was like a nuclear engineer that had some history on some litigation, and we needed them to continue their work on that rather than trying to refill that role within the state of Idaho. So we have a few, but it's certainly not very common.
Okay, thank you. Representative Tanner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I appreciate your take on telecommuting or work from home, or I think telecommuting is just a fancier way of saying work from home. But all the data that's being shown out there, all the data from all the big companies that have gone down this road, especially since COVID, same as what Idaho kind of followed in that aspect, we saw short-term gains in this. But none of them actually have been proven to actually continue to work in a long-term fashion. Yes, people like it. I mean, I guess I would like it if I stayed home and wanted to make my lunch and do my laundry while I was working, or whatever the case may be. I mean, if you're home, you're home. Getting distracted by the mailman or Amazon packages or whatever is going on in your life that day. So every single report that I've seen, I mean, I've seen multiple universities come out with them, productivity always decreases no matter which model they try, we're seeing continual decreases in this. The other aspect of it, so for me, I don't like it. I've tried it personally within my businesses, and it's never worked. And I've tried different things, different approaches, tried agreements, tried all these different things, and every single time I've seen a continual decline. So to somehow think that the state that can't seem to figure out a good way of managing most things, it takes us twice as long and costs us twice as much to do pretty much anything comparably to a private sector, somehow has mastered telecommunication or work from home would be a shock to me. So I personally would like to see, and it would be coming better from an HR aspect of how, pull some of those reports, look at some of the university data, look at what some of the large companies have put out. They've done multiple, HP throughout their history has done, I think, 3 or 4 different callbacks to the offices over this. But we are also paying for buildings that are underutilized. Like I said earlier when I was presenting, I've gone to the Chittenden campus and seen where entire divisions were pretty much blanket gone, not there. Now happen to be, it's supposed to be only 20%. I don't know. Again, I tried getting the badge data to try to find out what information we come from that. I think we have some work to do on that to try to narrow that down. But again, that should be something that you should be looking at as well. Are we getting what we're paying for? And I agree. I think you said that our pay was low based on the private sector. There are benefits to work for government because, we have a lot. We're the largest employer in the state, so obviously we've got something going for us, even though I don't think we should be. So to me, it'd be easier than us as a committee coming back to you and saying, this is what we're going to do. I do think it'd be good for you to come back to this committee with what you could actually do and what deregulation, or I shouldn't say deregulation, I should say what programs can we put in place that actually pull these people back to the office, refill our offices back up, because the productivity, what they also found is the productivity, having everybody in the office actually added to an increase in productivity than only portions of people. So to me, there's nothing about this that is actually going to be a cost efficient for the state. And I get that as a benefit that we're scared of losing people, but I don't think the state would hurt too much. It may solve our revenue problem if 20% of the state decided not to come back into the office. So anyway, I could go on for probably a little too long, so I'll close with that. But if you could bring some of that information back, it'd be great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Representative Tanner. There's a lot there to address. Ms. White, I don't know if you want to address that or come back at a future time with some more of these requests that were there.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Tanner, I appreciate your comments, and I agree that, telecommuting, it's complicated, it's nuanced, and I don't think there is any broad brush that you can paint with to say that it applies to everybody in the same exact way and everybody has the same experience and there's a right or a wrong way. And I think that's why you see so many employers kind of struggling and wrestling with this battle is, how do we find the right balance of telecommuting and trying to attract and retain state employees while also making sure that we maintain productivity and transparency and, overall good government. So happy to do any follow-up work and get any additional information that may be helpful for the committee.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And, I think you've heard of Representative Tanner. Maybe we can compile any other lists that we might need. All right. We're almost out of time here. Senator Summeroth, if you can make it quick so we can continue on.
It will be quick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Just to follow up to Representative Tanner's comments, when Idaho shut down during the pandemic, state employees, it was an expectation that all state employees were able to continue working from home, and they did so. And they did an excellent job continuing the work on the behalf of the state. And now we're here a few years later, we're readjusting. And in some cases, absolutely, people need to be in the office. But some people have continued to work from home and have done so really well. During the pandemic, of course, people were working from home, and I was one of them. And in fact, I worked more than I did when I wasn't, because it just never went away. So in some ways, I'm sure there are folks out there that are happy to have that 20% rule in place and are happy to go back to the office because it allows for that separation back in their life. So thank you to Representative Tanner for bringing up that point.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Ms. White, for your presentation. Next on the agenda, we're going to discuss Medicaid expansion in Idaho. This was brought up in our last meeting, so we want to dive in further. We have Sasha O'Connell, the Deputy Director of the Department of Health and Welfare, with us, as well as Alex Williamson, who's a Senior Analyst with our LSO Budget and Policy Division. And I believe we have a handout as well from Ms. O'Connell and Ms. Williamson as well. So Ms. O'Connell, if you could introduce yourself for the record and then go ahead and present to the task force. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Again, for the record, I'm Sasha O'Connell, Deputy Director over Medicaid with the Department of Health and Welfare, new in this role and taking over Director Sharon's previous position. So I was asked to present to the committee today a sort of high-level overview of Medicaid expansion and some of the laws that affect Medicaid expansion and how that's changed over the last few years, and also provide a sort of high-level overview of eligibility. And I'll talk about some new laws that are coming down the pipeline for us and will affect eligibility and expansion. So as many of you know, as all of you know, I would imagine, expansion was approved through a ballot initiative, Proposition 2, that was in 2018, and then it was codified through Senate Bill 1224 shortly thereafter and formally implemented January 2020. That's also, I'm sure, will resonate with you all as the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we'll talk a little bit about how that affected eligibility in a moment here. So with the development of Medicaid expansion, there were a lot of services that were transitioned in the Department of Health and Welfare. The Division of Behavioral Health used to provide some direct services that since Medicaid was expanded to a whole new population across the state, they started sunsetting a lot of those services and started to have them provided through Medicaid. Some of those services include mobile crisis units, mobile response you might be familiar with, as well as assertive community treatment, which used to be sort of separate treatment and now is a bundled payment through our Magellan contract. And you can think of that as hospital level care for folks with serious mental illness and substance use disorder out in the community. They also had some early serious mental illness services that were also provided, as well as a couple of others that have since folded into Medicaid. And the state has also made the decision to sunset county indigent funds and state catastrophic funds for uncompensated care at hospitals. So when we talk about Medicaid expansion, we are referring to services that are provided to folks based off of their income level. And here's sort of an example of what that income threshold is. So Medicaid expansion is available to people who do not have disabilities and whose families earn up to 138% of the federal poverty level. So for a single person, that is $21,600 a year. For a family of four, that's $43,176 a year. And as someone enrolls in Medicaid, there are certain processes that the Division of Self-Reliance has to go through to ensure eligibility. So that includes looking at the household composition through an interview process that generally takes 45 to 60 minutes to complete. There is an online application as well, but no matter which pathway folks choose to apply for Medicaid, the Division of Self-Reliance has to go through and ensure that the participant meets application requirements, including, checking their contact information, their residency status, seeing if they have existing health coverage elsewhere, their disability or medical conditions to see which sort of Medicaid they may be eligible for. And the reason that I bring up this sort of renewal process is because this was a pretty important part of eligibility since Medicaid expansion came to Idaho because of the public health emergency, which I'll talk about. So if you look at enrollment over time, you are going to see a very steady climb in both the Medicaid population as well as the Medicaid expansion population since Medicaid expansion started in January 2020. And the primary driver of that is because under the COVID-19 pandemic, there were limitations under the public health emergency for us to disenroll folks in Medicaid expansion as well as Medicaid more broadly. So that steep drop that you see there in January 2023 is when that limitation was removed and some of those disenrollments started to be processed here in Idaho. And today you'll see a sort of leveling off. It's certainly still an increase, but if we look at Medicaid expansion in January 2020, we were at 64,000 folks, and today we are hovering closer to 87,000. So as I mentioned, under the COVID-19 pandemic, President Trump and Congress at the time provided states with an enhanced match of 6.2 percentage points for the traditional population, not for Medicaid expansion, but everybody that you normally would think of as being part of Medicaid. So folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, older adults. We had an enhanced match during that time, but one of the requirements to maintain that enhanced match was also passed and signed by President Trump in March 2020, which was that continuous enrollment in Medicaid in order to have access to those funds. So at the end of the public health emergency, just before the end, actually, we were one of the first states to start processing those redeterminations. We processed about 150,000 renewals of folks that had been participating in Medicaid over the course of the public health emergency, but we had determined, we had to keep those folks on there, and when we redetermined those applications, only about 31,900 were determined as eligible over that time. So we had a significant shift in our overall population, not just affecting Medicaid expansion, but also some members of traditional Medicaid too. So Idaho was one of the only states to start that unwinding as soon as possible, just before the end of that public health emergency declaration. That was obviously over many conversations with the legislature of that being a priority. And it took about 6 months to go through that process. And we did that on schedule without additional funding or staff. So since Medicaid expansion came to Idaho, there have been many policy attempts, some successful and some not, to reform Medicaid expansion. And some things that have changed over the last couple of years include that we need to ensure that folks who have an in-state address stay in Medicaid expansion, even if that address has changed for us and they haven't updated it with us. If we find in our systems that someone's still an Idahoan, they're still in Idaho, then we need to make sure that that person continues to receive benefits. And if we find that they have moved out of state, for example, we need to use 2 communication modalities before closing those benefits per federal law. Another significant change is that we are now required to provide former foster youth up to the age of 26 with access to Medicaid services, regardless of how their income changes as they age out of the foster system. And the reason for that is because foster youth are all members of Medicaid. They all receive those benefits when they're foster youth, and sometimes that transition out of foster care can be challenging for folks who are aging out of the system. So this was both a federal directive, and I know there was a lot of interest from the legislature on that front as well. So we've also attempted to reform Medicaid expansion in a couple of ways that have not been successful. Idaho has sought a waiver that would allow us to have work and community engagement requirements for the Medicaid expansion population. So for folks that don't have a disability determination, that puts them in one of those other categories. And we have applied for that with a waiver. This was shortly after the Proposition 2 ballot initiative, and that was pended. So what that means is that we didn't get a response from CMS that was affirmative, that we could move forward. And part of the reason that was held up was because of court decisions, right, about work requirements in the Medicaid expansion population more broadly. So that has been, I would say that we regularly follow up with CMS on that, but it has been paused because of those previous court determinations. And I'm going to talk about how those conversations have ramped back up with some more recent legislation that was passed at the federal level. We also had pursued what are called choice waivers. So this would be a 1332 waiver. And I use the word waiver because what that means is we are waiving the federal law that restricts Medicaid. So we are asking for permission from the federal government to do certain things with a waiver. And one of those waivers was to allow people who are in the income brackets of 100% of the federal poverty level up to 138% to have the option to purchase health insurance on Your Health Idaho on the insurance marketplace and receive that premium tax credit in order to have access to health care through the private insurance market. This has been denied in the past because essentially Medicaid is less expensive than private health insurance, and we need to ensure that those decisions are cost neutral for the federal government when we ask to waive some of those laws. And so previously that had been the reasoning, but this has been revamped as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So last session, you all passed House Bill 345, and that had some pretty significant changes to Medicaid and Medicaid expansion. I'm just going to talk about the Medicaid expansion components specifically, but happy to delve into some of the other big changes that happened. One of the things that House Bill 345 directed us to do was to apply for that choice waiver again to make sure that people have the option to get on private health insurance and have that advanced premium tax credit to be able to do so. So we've restarted conversations with the Department of Insurance on this, and I think that we've made some significant progress. Director Cameron and Deputy Director Wes have also been leading this initiative because it really has a lot to do with insurance more broadly. And we've been supporting them with this application and plan to be on track with submitting that in July. We found some creative ways to use the Department of Insurance's reinsurance program to help fund that gap. So I would really defer to the Department of Insurance to speak in more detail on that, but there's some exciting progress in that space is what I'll say. We also were directed to take a look at ex parte renewal and pre-populated forms. So ex parte renewal is a federal requirement that we look at all available data to use that information to automatically re-enroll folks if we are able to. If people have been in Medicaid before, we were required to pull down any information that we could from, say, taxes or from other sources to re-enroll those folks automatically if we had all that information available. And pre-populated forms were a policy that required us to fill in what information was available. Even if 100% of that information wasn't available, we would fill it in with what was and then send out that form to the participant to fill in the rest to make that application process easier, if you will. And House Bill 345 directed us that by 2026, July of next year, we are to submit a waiver to see if we can remove those requirements. I believe that the language was a little bit broader than that. It was that we are to essentially end those policies, but in studying that a little bit closer, since that still is the federal guidance, we would need to ask for a waiver approval for that. But there were several other provisions of House Bill 345 that were supported by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was signed by the president on Independence Day of this year. And so I'll dig into that as well. What it means when the federal law starts to support a lot of these initiatives that the state has prioritized with House Bill 345 is that there's less work on the administrative end of things because we now use a template of sorts with a state plan amendment instead of a waiver of federal law. So it'll be more straightforward in the application process. It also means that we have more clear guidance from the feds and how they would like to see us execute some of these policy changes, and it will speed up the process overall. So when when there were provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that were very similar to House Bill 345, we brought this to the Medicaid review panel and had explained to them what that crossover was, and told them at the time that our intention is to align with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act because it will expedite the process overall. So OBA, as well as House Bill 345, require eligibility redeterminations every 6 months for the expansion population. Today, the eligibility redetermination process is just once a year, so it's going to double the number of times that we check in with the participant and confirm that they are still eligible. There's also increased cost sharing in House Bill 345 and OBA. They are pretty aligned with one another, except that the OBA provisions are specific to the expansion population. And they also have specific carve-outs for behavioral health services, I believe FQHCs, and, federally qualified health clinics like your Terry Riley and your Full Circle are also exempt, and rural health clinics are as well. One big distinction here with 345 is that OBA does not direct us to tie that cost sharing to eligibility. In fact, that still is a challenge in Medicaid because we're not allowed to disenroll someone because they did not pay their cost sharing. So think co-pays, premiums, things like that. But what is allowable is the provider is allowed to not render services to that participant if they do not pay their copay. So we will be pursuing increased cost sharing in alignment with OBA as well as 345 and are on track to do that. Some other major changes are around work and community engagement. So as I mentioned, there was sort of a pending status, if you will, with CMS for these requests to allow us to have work requirements and community engagement requirements for the expansion population. But OBA made this a requirement for expansion members effective December 31st, 2026. And so what that means is that the state will be pursuing state plan amendments instead of the waiver authority, and we will be pulling back our previous application and amending our state plan, which is like our agreement with the feds. And it will be a much more straightforward process overall. OBA also had a little bit more clarity around administrative procedures for participants. So made it very clear that participants who are determined as not meeting community engagement and work requirements have to go through the fair hearings process. They have rights to that. They also have 30 days to be able to cure that deficiency, if you will, or their non-compliance with the work reporting. It also ensures that there aren't any conflict of interest with managed care organizations being the entity that determines whether a work requirement is met. So all of that clarity, was helpful on our end because we were charging forward with this policy direction with House Bill 345 regardless, and this kind of provides a little bit of guardrails for us. It also had hardship waivers for folks who have experienced natural disasters or, in areas that have particularly high unemployment above 8%. So we anticipate having a little bit more guidance from CMS here in the fall, including hopefully a template, if you will, to make amendments to our state plan to move forward with these changes. I think that this is my last slide, but other provisions of OBA included limiting retroactive coverage starting in 2027. So previously, across all of Medicaid, we would, if somebody had been determined as eligible for Medicaid, newly eligible, and they had claims that went back, prior a couple of months, we would determine that person as eligible backwards retroactively for 3 months, but that has also changed under OBA and is limited to 1 month for the expansion population and 2 months for other folks. So these are all pretty significant shifts that will certainly affect, I would say, our general operations in the Medicaid expansion space and will affect eligibility, I would say, as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or I think that Alex is going to follow up with her end of the presentation and talking about budget, and it might be good to see that first too. But
Sure. Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Yeah, Alex, why don't you go ahead, Ms. Williamson, with yours, and then Ms. O'Connell will probably call you back up for some questions about your part of the presentation. So let's talk budget numbers. Committee also, we have that handout before us as well, just front and back. So go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and make your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Alex Williamson, Budget and Policy Analyst with Legislative Services, and I have the Medicaid assignment specifically. My purpose today was to kind of dovetail off of what Ms. O'Connell was talking about in terms of policy history and significant statutory changes with Medicaid, specifically expansion over the last few years. What I'm going to cover today is specific to the budget, history, sort of expenditures, just to kind of give the committee an idea of the scale of any fiscal impact that you might have off of any of the recommendations that come out of this committee. So I just included this for reference for the committee. I don't plan on spending a lot of time on it, but just wanted to include this breakout of population and expenditures for each of the plans. Again, just to give you an idea of what participants are part of each demographic and what piece of the expenditure pie each of those plans are. This is the fiscal year 2025 data, so our most recent budget year that just closed. You can see expansion was sitting right around 100,000. As Ms. O'Connell noted, it's dropped down. We're hovering closer to the 90,000 range these days. And expansion in fiscal year 2025 at least accounted for about 23% of the expenditures for Medicaid in the state of Idaho. Okay, so this slide is our estimated expenditures versus actual expenditures. So the dark green bar that you'll see for each year beginning in fiscal year 2020, this represents estimated expenditures, which includes any original appropriation made by the legislature, as well as supplementals or rescissions, so any of those mid-year adjustments that you make to the budget. It also includes any reappropriation authority granted by the legislature, as well as executive carry forward and non-cognizable adjustments made by the governor's office. So the way to look at that green bar is your total available funding. And then the dotted gray bar represents actual expenditures for each of those years. I started this chart with fiscal year 2020, since that was the first year that Idaho saw the expansion population. And you can see total expenditures or total funding available was $2.89 billion in fiscal year 2020. So that was the year that expansion went live. And again, this is all funds, so general, dedicated, federal, and this slide includes all four of the Medicaid plans, so the 3 traditional plans as well as the expansion population. Fiscal year 2021 is the first year that we had a full 12 months of expansion expenses. Fiscal year 2023, you see that bump up. This was the year that we saw the upper payment limit changes, and you start to see those changes start to drive the budget up, specifically in the federal and dedicated space. So no impact to general funds because the hospital assessment piece was covering the state share of those supplemental payments. Fiscal year 2025, you also start to see a jump up. This was the year that the Idaho Behavioral Health Plan expenses started to come online, and we did see some increases in terms of the capitation rates as those started to get evaluated by our actuary services, as well as just increased utilization. So Idahoans started to use those behavioral plan services as they came online. Fiscal year 2026, I did want to note this amount, the $5.23 billion, does include the provider rate reduction that the department announced earlier. That was designed to offset the governor's holdback that he announced. That reduces the supplemental ask from the agency by about 30 million. So they've capped their supplemental ask for fiscal year 26 to $60 million on the general fund. Okay. Looking specifically at the expansion plan, you can see, again, fiscal year 2020 was the first year that expansion went live, so we only have about half a year worth of expenses. And so you see fiscal year 2021, where that first full 12 months of expenses starts to hit our budget. As Ms. O'Connell mentioned, there was the public health emergency that happened to coincide those first couple of years, and so the population did not go down, and so you see a slight uptick of expenditures, fiscal year 21-22. I did also want to note fiscal year 2026 on this chart, the 1.24 billion. The original appropriation for expansion for 2026 was actually 1.34 billion. So this amount includes the population forecast adjustments for the mid-year supplemental. The department forecasts actually show a reduction in the expansion plan expenditures for our current year. And so what you'll see as you start to look over the fiscal year 27 budget request is that for 2026, expansion expenses are expected to go down, which is offsetting some of the increases that we're seeing in the traditional space. And then just to round things out for this committee's discussion, I did include on this slide fiscal year 2027's requested amount of 1.32 billion. I will note that agencies, as Mr. Bybee mentioned earlier, agencies have been directed by the governor's office to resubmit revised budget plans at the end of this week with an ongoing 3%. And so I just wanted to put it on the committee's radar. The 2027 number I anticipate will change, but I don't have that new number just yet. With that, Mr. Chair, I will conclude my remarks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Williamson. Committee members, questions for either of our presenters? Senator Lakey.
Thank you, Co-Chair. So some of these questions may be for Ms. O'Connell, some for Ms. Williamson. I'll let you kind of decide who's better to answer. The first one I think is less budget and just more reality. So Medicaid expansion provides coverage to non-disabled adults. And then you have those income levels. Is that eligibility in perpetuity? If they keep their same job, don't get another education or a different job or get promoted, they're always eligible for Medicaid or not?
Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Chairman Lakey. So there is a redetermination process that right now is every year. So participants need to go through that process to prove that they continue to be eligible. But yes, if circumstances do not change, there is not, a lifetime limit like you see in other welfare programs such as TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, the cash assistance program that has a lifetime limit. There's not something similar that is in Medicaid expansion. As long as folks continue to prove that they are eligible and meeting those income requirements and others, then they continue to be eligible.
Okay. Senator Lakey, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. So this may be more for Ms. Williamson on the budget side. So the tables you gave us have estimated and actual. Are those our estimates? Who's doing the estimating here?
Ms. Williamson.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Senator Lakey, those, so estimated expenditures is the term that we use in LSO with our what we call our decision unit model. So as we're building the budget, we start with our original appropriation for the current year, the amount that the legislature set for the agency to start that fiscal year with. To that is added any mid-year adjustments, so any supplemental asks or any rescissions based on updated forecasts. In addition, any reappropriation from a prior year, and then any executive carry forward or non-cognizable adjustments. All of that rolls up into the amount that's available to spend. We term it estimated expenditures, but it is sort of that full amount that's available for the department to use.
Go ahead, Senator Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So essentially, cutting it way back, it's your best estimate of what's allowable and what you anticipate you may spend.
Ms. Williamson.
Thank you. It's that upper limit to what the legislature has approved for the agency to spend in that year. So it's their upper cap.
Follow up, Mr.
Go ahead.
Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Williamson. So I guess I'm want to focus now on not so much what you plug into the budget and what you project, but what the voters were told when the Proposition 2 was passed as far as the cost to the state. And I had to do a little bit of AI and rack my own memory because it's been a little while, but some of the numbers that they put out, that there would be a net $10 million cost to the state. Do you recall any of those numbers? Is that tracked? Do you know how much it's costing the state? And maybe that's what's part in this table, the net cost compared to what was put forward in Proposition 2.
Ms. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Co-Chair. So the numbers that were originally published were part of something called the Milliman Report back in 2018. And so the numbers, from 2018 to 2020, nowhere in the original analysis by that firm was any indication of a global pandemic and rising healthcare costs and inflation, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yes, the numbers were massively understated compared to what reality ended up being. I can get a copy if you'd like to review what was in the Milliman report. I can get that sent to the committee afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Ms. Williamson, if you could provide that for us. Okay, Senator, go ahead.
The second piece of your question in terms of what the offsets were. So when expansion went live, and Ms. O'Connell covered this in part of her slides briefly, things like the catastrophic healthcare fund and indigent funds within the counties, those went away with expansion going online. I don't know if I have any offsetting numbers to share with you, but I know that there are amounts in other spaces, expenses that went away with the idea that Medicaid would fill those needs. And so it definitely muddies the waters in terms of trying to figure out what the total impact is with those programs that don't exist anymore.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson. One more question?
Go ahead, Senator.
And then I'll let others have a turn. I may have some more. So I may follow up with you, Ms. Williamson. Massively understated, a good term, maybe not a technical term, but I would be interested in maybe some more specific there. What's our authority, and maybe this is Ms. O'Connell, what's our authority? Is it either repeal expansion, or is it, can we say certain groups are eligible? What's our authority to deal with expansion? Is it all or nothing? Are there aspects that we can work on besides those waivers that we've talked about and the changes in the big beautiful bill?
Ms. O'Connell.
Thanks, Chairman. I would say that there's a wide range of options. Medicaid expansion currently has a 90-10 match. So for every $10 that we put in with general funds, $90 are provided by the federal government. So there are certain provisions that we would need to follow in order to keep that match. But with that being said, other states have pursued Medicaid expansion in a different manner that has a lower federal match. So for example, Georgia has pursued work requirements for its population. It's the only, there are not many other states that have pursued that. I'm trying to think if anyone has one underway right now. I think that because of OBA, many states have transitioned to kind of following the new OBA guidelines. But essentially what Georgia has done is has limited Medicaid expansion except to folks that meet those work requirements. But in doing so, they've risked their federal match there, and that was a policy decision on their part to design their program in that way. So there is some flexibility, I would say, but it would require legislation, of course, because this is, the law of the state of Idaho today is to provide expansion to the full population. And so revisions to that are not in alignment with federal law today do have an effect on that 90-10 match potentially. But as I mentioned, the work requirements piece is something that the state is actively pursuing, particularly fast with the OBA law changes.
Okay, thank you. Senator Bierke.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. This would be, I think I have two questions for clarification, so one for each of you, but this one will be for Ms. O'Connell. I remember, going back a little bit in time, that somebody from the Idaho Exchange was testifying in one of our committees about if we had that tax break for the choice, that it would only allow about 33% of the people that are currently in that expanded population to be able to take advantage of that. We'd leave roughly 67 or whatever percent not being able to be taken care of. If we were to move to an option where the choice would allow that whole population of expanded, could we at this point get all those people into a position where they can take advantage of that tax break and get on the exchange? Is that possible now through what you were kind of talking about? I'm just asking for clarification.
Ms. O'Connell.
Chairman, Senator Bierke, great question. So I think what you're referring to is that the full Medicaid expansion population goes from 0 to 138% of the federal poverty level. And the choice waiver typically has targeted folks between 100 and 138% of the federal poverty level. That is what House Bill 345 directs us to pursue. Again, is just that part of the expansion population and to ensure that those folks have an option to get their health insurance through Your Health Idaho. But I can follow up to see if it is something that we could pursue, with a broader income bracket and all of Medicaid expansion participants having access to it. I'm not sure that the reinsurance idea of using those funds to cover the population would now free up our ability to allow folks from 0 to 100% of FPL to get their health insurance through Your Health Idaho. But that's something I can follow up on.
Okay. Senator, next question.
Follow up, thank you. So what if we were dealing with just the 100 to 138? Would that group possibly be able to take advantage of that and then go into our private sector through the exchange?
Ms. O'Connell.
Chairman, Senator Bierke, that's exactly what we are applying for the authority to do today, is to allow those folks to get the advanced premium tax credit so that they have reduced or no costs associated with purchasing health insurance through Your Health Idaho. That's the federal authority that we're seeking. Yep. And I think that we've made significant progress in our conversations with CMS and the Department of Insurance on that front. So we will be submitting for permission to seek that federal authority in the next couple of months after a public comment period.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Co-Chair, if I can ask that
go
one
ahead.
additional question,
One more.
also for clarification for Ms. Williamson. We were talking about that 4% provider rate cut a little bit. You mentioned that, and it almost made it seem like they were making that cut, but then they were going to ask for a supplemental to make up the difference. Did I get that right?
Ms. Williamson.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Thank you, Senator. I'll take a stab at the question, and then Ms. O'Connell might be able to correct me if I get something wrong. But yeah, so the forecast for the mid-year supplemental adjustments would have been an increase, or is an increase, over the fiscal year 26 original appropriation. And so in trying to, in the spirit of a holdback, trying to reduce that amount on the general fund, that's what prompted the 4% provider rate cut, to be able to reduce the amount being asked. But I'll let Ms. O'Connell add to that if she would.
Ms. O'Connell, do you have any additional clarity?
I think some important context is that the governor's executive order was to pull back 3% from our appropriated levels for 2026. For Medicaid, that would have meant $29 million in general funds below our appropriated levels. We were projecting having a $100 million supplemental on top of that. So the 4% rate reductions yielded about $36.8 million in general funds and still left us remaining with a $60 million supplemental.
Thank you.
That's clear. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other further comments, questions? Oh, sorry. You're right there. Representative Scott. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Seminole. My question is, since we've expanded all this to these able-bodied adults, I see that it's like 23% expansion. That money is now not going to the vulnerable. And I'm getting calls in my district. I know questions, a lot of concerns that children aren't taken care of and that. Can you give me any insight to kind of what's happening nationally with the vulnerable adult population that was on Medicaid, and are they getting the services, all the services that they used to get, or are they getting cut back because we're expanding it out?
Ms. O'Connell?
Chairman, Representative Scott, I get similar questions pretty frequently. I would say that probably the calls that you're receiving more recently are around the rate reductions, which were across the board affecting all providers and services. I think that, you know, when we speak about how rates have changed in Medicaid over time, you know, there's never been a decision to, you know, for the legislature to invest in Medicaid expansion rates specifically over another group. I would say those folks, the way that we set our rates today are based off of the services that are rendered, and many folks in the traditional population receive the same services as the expansion population, so they're going to be similar. The exception to that, I would say, are our long-term services and supports, so our long-term care to help folks stay in their homes or receive care, you know, in a skilled nursing facility, for example. And those were affected by the rate reductions and the governor's executive order. We are taking that information and examining it. We're doing an access analysis as required by CMS to see if we plan on moving forward with the 4% across the board option, the plan that we've laid out today. We had a period of public comment over the last 30 days to receive input from the public, and we'll have a monitoring plan where we're required to ensure access to care. But that's something that we will be looking at specifically, is whether certain Medicaid providers or services should be held harmless because they are 100% reliant on Medicaid, whereas other provider groups and services have a mixed payer model where they receive funding from Medicare as well as private health insurance.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Scott. Representative Tanner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do a couple clarifications real quick. One of the ones that Senator Lakey, I think he had a really great question when he was asking about the total cost of what was being proposed to the state of Idaho and the citizens when that initiative originally ran out. It's $400 million. Again, that's $40 million to the state. Currently, we're well over 3x what that initial projection was. Now, anybody that actually could have looked at the numbers would have told you that those numbers were inaccurate in the first place and that we were going to see significant costs and growth in there. I guess one of my questions to Ms. O'Connell is, and this came from one of your own reports, was how many people are actually working when expansion was brought forward, the majority was actually working, and they would qualify based on they didn't make enough. Now we're actually seeing, based on your own reports, that it's about 50% that is actually working. So this is always the fear when you push out socialistic type programs, that you see a massive reduction of people that are actually, I mean, why work? I get this stuff for free. If I do work, I'm going to lose this. And so I'm just curious of what do you think is changing out there that is actually changing why it's such a large percentage of that population is not working at this point in time?
Ms. O'Connell?
Chairman, Representative Tanner, I would have to see, whether we're referring to the exact same data points, because sometimes I hear the percentage of, households that have someone who's working in them versus the participant themselves are working, and that might be part of the discrepancy. I'm not sure, and I'd be happy to look at it. But overall, I would say that the legislature has taken many steps in the direction of work requirements, and we plan to pursue those in the next year with support from the federal government on that front. So I think that the policy changes that you're describing are ones that we are on the track towards.
Ms. O'Connell, and ask if maybe you could provide that at a later date to this task force if you have some more data points on that. Representative Tanner?
Yeah, just some follow-ups.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I can point to you. I mean, I know that even you can go to McDonald's at this point in time and you work, I think it's 30 or 32 hours and not even full time. And I mean, that's a pretty basic job and still not make enough to not qualify for Medicaid expansion. So it's not like it's that there's a large threshold to get to. So it even makes me even more concerned when we have this amount. It just shows me that this program is not actually working. This is no longer that hand up that it was kind of sold as program. This has now become just a straight handout program. And I'd kind of refer back to Representative Scott's comments as well. I mean, you've got a vulnerable population. That is the population we're trying to protect here. I mean, the elderly, the disabled. Those are the ones, not the able-bodied working adults. And I think that's where this body overall is shifting into going, what are we doing? We're seeing these large cost drivers from you guys. I mean, that you just admitted that we're looking at $100 million supplemental, and then even with the holdbacks, we're still over 60 million, or at least 60 million. I mean, that's pretty insane based on a relatively, I mean, we have a very strong market currently in the state of Idaho, and yet we're still seeing growth. I mean, doesn't matter when you look at the labor reports, we have a ton of jobs out there. It's not like that we're lacking in this. So I would implore you guys to actually continue to give the legislature as many options as it can for cuts. If you can provide this committee as well, those same options and what kind of cuts we can do. Can we actually lower this back down to 400 million? Just say that's all we're going to pay. What are some of those options that we can continue to do? I know we have, and part of our original one was to get work requirements on there that we have sent into the federal government year after year after year. Can we actually get them to fully do that? Or what those options look like? I think you mentioned the Georgia plan to actually shift us out there and go, well, we're willing to take a little bit larger hit because we know that 50% of this population is not going to do it. They're going to have to step up if they want to actually hit this. So hopefully you can provide some of that back to the committee. The only thing I'm going to ask of you is, I know that, and I had worked quite closely when Director Cameron was kind of the interim director for health and welfare, and he had a lot of really good ideas and a lot of great insight. So I just was hoping that you could commit that you could actually work with him on some of these different ideas and some of the programs that he actually had, because a lot of those ones were cost-saving ideas, and a lot of what I've seen come out of health and welfare for the last, I don't know, I guess I've only been here 3 years, but as long back as I can actually remember going back and looking at, were a lot of heavy cost drivers. So hopefully you can commit that you will continue to work with him on some of those ideas on how to actually save, as your administration has actually changed drastically.
Ms. O'Connell, any response?
Representative Tanner, I'm happy to continue to work with the Department of Insurance. We regularly converse with them on the choice waiver and a number of other topics, so happy to do that. I would also say that work requirements are the law of the land today under OBA. So we will continue to take steps towards those policy changes, and I believe that those changes at the federal level will make things much more straightforward for us to pursue House Bill 345.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, committee. Thank you to Ms. O'Connell and Ms. Williamson for your time. And looks like we'll have some homework there as well. So some reports back. All right. For the next part, I'm going to be up about agency consolidation options. We have a handout there that I prepared, and I will turn the gavel over to my co-chair, Senator Lakey, to run this portion of the meeting while I go present.
Thanks, Co-Chair. We'll go ahead and let you get up there, and then once you're ready, Representative Ehlers, just go ahead and state your name for the record, and we'll go through your slides.
All right. Mr. Chairman, members of this committee, I'm Representative Jeff Ehlers, District 21 Meridian. This is to discuss the agencies, the divisions, the departments, the commissions, etc., and some ideas that have been brought forth in terms of elimination, reduction, consolidation, and other ideas. And as we saw in one of the original presentations from LSO, we have over 220 of these types of entities and organizations. And high level and total, we've pulled out about 75 of those for further examination. I've classified them, and I've also want to point out this has been some collaboration with the executive branch and some of ones they've been working on, as well as input from this task force and the members here and some of their thoughts. This is just an initial list. We may find more that we want to look at. In fact, some of these we may actually find, hey, maybe they're doing okay, maybe they're being efficient, we'll let them be. Others we may want to, like I said, modify, such as reduce and eliminate, consolidate. Broadly categorized into low-hanging fruit, which I realize maybe nothing in this job is low-hanging fruit. There's always certain things that come up. Next level is sort of, they've been proposed but need some more work, and then some legislative ideas that we've brought forth, and then a broader list of just further review that we need to dive in. So if we go to the next slide, I call this low-hanging fruit because, and it's cutting off. Okay, well, your slide has, packet has all of them. There seems to be some broad support with the executive branch on these ideas. And in fact, some of them, such as number 7, moving the STEM Action Center to the Workforce Development Council. I know Representative Horman's been in talks with them and is already drafting legislation to that end. So these are sort of ones that are farther along in the conversation. The last few, so I think it's 10 through 14, those kind of came about through the Code Cleanup Act and were identified. They're sitting in code. But there's not really anything happening with them anymore. So those are sort of just removing the statute and just getting rid of them altogether. Let's go to the next slide. These are some that have been, just need some more work. They've been proposed, specifically the executive branch has been looking at this, consolidating these 5 entities into one agency. That's going to take some more look to figure out what that looks like if we want to go forward with that. And then combine Division of Liquor and Division of Lottery. They seem to have some overlap in terms of responsibilities and what they're looking at. Next slide. These are some higher level ideas that need additional work as well, brought forward by the legislature. Probably the biggest one is at the top of the list, merging the Department of Finance into the Department of Insurance. We see there could be some cost savings there and some reductions in FTPs by doing so. And then I won't go through all of them, but you can see broadly some ideas in terms of moving things under for some overlapping entities. some possibilities for mergers or eliminations, creating a different department, and some elimination of others, or just moving some sort of responsibilities, or changing maybe some responsibilities, or downsizing some responsibilities. Then let's go to the next slide, which is the big list. Gets cut off on the screen, but this shows 46 of those that could be looked at. So there's a lot on there. They range from, and some of this list comes from, we had LSO provide a report for those that have like no FTPs or no appropriations, or maybe they're really small, 5 or less, really small agency. Some of those are on there. Others are ones that have been brought forward, from our colleagues or from one of us to look at as potential reduction, elimination, consolidation, and so forth. So with that, that's the list. And what I'd appreciate, either, we can do this now or later, is input from everyone on maybe priorities that you'd like to focus on. And because this is going to be, as we've talked about before, this task force is a multi-year thing. It's going to take a while to work through. We have 75 of these, agencies and departments to look at. That's going to take a while. And so just gain a sense of priority on your ideas that you want to work on. And then I think as much as we can get through some of these, I think proposing recommendations from this task force, say, hey, here's the ones we're going to recommend, at least for next session, and saying we're going to draft legislation and take it to the germane committees, by next session. And probably one of us will carry that type of legislation and move forward, particularly if you have one that you're interested in. So happy to answer any questions or take comments.
Thanks, Representative Ehlers. Committee, I think this is kind of a little bit of a prime the pump, see what's out there. I don't know that we have a lengthy discussion allocated, but I'll certainly take any initial thoughts or comments. I'll start with one. And Representative Ehlers, you and I chatted about this briefly. I would take off on the low-hanging fruit 8, move Office of Drug Policy to the Department of Health and Welfare. I had discussions with this with the governor's office in the past, and Idaho has taken a pretty strong stance on illegal drugs and have seen what's happened in neighboring states. And I think if we move that to the Department of Health and Welfare, reality is it's one of the biggest bureaucracies in the state, and it's focused more on services than I think the policy of maintaining our strong stance on illegal drugs. So that's my initial comment on number 8.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? Representative Tanner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would actually agree with Senator Lakey on that one. I'm not as happy as can be with the drug policy aspect, but I think moving into health and welfare kind of got in some trouble on some of the drug aspects in the past. And this was through the Narcan needle exchange program. So they were actually encouraging drug use, not disencouraging drug use. So the one for me, though, is you got the Office of Species Conservation moving with the Office of Energy and Mineral Resources. Office of Energy and Mineral Resources is an executive order that created that one. And so that's one that has to get continually created over and over. Now, I do think that's something that we should continue to look at. We took a lot of the funding out of that this last session through JFAC. I honestly, there's very little in there that I think are worthwhile to even continue to look at. I think we could actually, if it was me and I was governor, I'd be removing that one myself. But the Office of Species Conservation, I do think should get moved. I've looked both into ag and water resources. They're currently in Southeast Idaho. They're doing a lot in water, but I think overall it's related to ag. I do have Representative Boyle looking into that, so she should be able to give some recommendations back onto that one. I have actually been working on the proposal by the governor. I've actually been working on this one, so that second page first. So I've actually been looking at doing combining these. The only one that I'd say that need to get added onto that one is the SILC, the State Independent Living Council. I think that one should actually be on there as well. But a lot of these ones they're limited. Most of them are all federal funds. Most of them have limitations on administration, like how much administration they can have based on that. So I think we can actually get more money going back out into these by doing the combination. So I actually think that is a good idea because that is something I've been working on. The only one, and that'd be the next one, just legislative ideas. I probably would caution a little bit on the license and certification through health and welfare to DOPL. There's a little bit more that's going on there than what I think a lot of people think. So I don't know that would actually be a good place forward, even though that's what DOPL kind of does. I think we would have to really strip a few things out and probably prep up some stuff to actually do that. The one thing that I would really look at as we're looking at doing any one of these, are we actually decreasing regulations? Like, are we actually saving FTPs? Are we eliminating unwasteful use? Sometimes moving some of these ones, because I've looked at them for now, some of these ones for the last several years, and I get down to it and I'm like, I don't know if I'm actually going to save any money. Sometimes with some of them I've got through, I'm like, honestly, I think this might end up being a cost increase, not a cost decrease. So I think we should make sure as we're going through some of these ones, we should have a really good idea as we're pushing these out, what we're expecting to be a drop in FTP, what we're expecting to be a deregulation. And maybe you've already done some of that work on some of those, but I guess that is my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Tanner. Senator Semmelroth.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Oh, sure. Representative Baylors, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could comment on that. Thank you. And thank you, Representative Tanner. Yeah, just at a high level, and as the co-chair said here, this is to get to the discussion started, right? We needed some point to at least look at and say. And I think if, at least for me personally, if our task force is going to recommend it, we probably need to come forward with some pretty concrete ideas of the savings, of the efficiencies, of the deregulation. What is this actually going to do? And I think we need to make compelling arguments of why we would recommend something like this. So, as we dive into these, this is just a starting point, but I think if we bring a recommendation and we want this task force to vote to recommend it so we can take it, I think we probably need to, have that backing of those types of data points. So thank you.
Just one last
Go ahead, Representative Tanner.
Thank you. Why we're looking at some of these things, I think maybe look at finance and insurance. At one point in time, those were together. They're very similar in nature. Or is it actually on there? Okay.
That's
I didn't catch that one. Is the, number one. What about commerce and labor? Have you got that one up there?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Baylors.
I don't think so. Oh. It's not listed as combining, it's listed as possibly looking at.
Okay.
So the idea hasn't been to merge, but that could certainly be an idea is let's look at merging or instead of just
And then get
scaling
rid of the
back.
hotel tax.
Okay, Senator Semmelroth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Ehlers, for all your work on this. Looking at the legislature ideas, I'm wondering what kind of a process you envision or have thought of how you move forward on some of these. So I'm thinking about, like what indicators would be used in deciding if an agency would be merged or eliminated. What are the thresholds? What type of engagement will these agencies have in this process? Ideas like that.
Representative Ehlers.
Thank you, Chairman and Senator Semmelroth. That's a good question. As briefly explained to Representative Tanner, I think we do need to look at cost savings, FTPs, dollars, efficiencies, and that. In terms of the process, I think that's a lot of what the task force can determine for ourselves. I think we need to go through the process to the point that we would be comfortable recommending it to all our colleagues in the body, because this, whatever we do, we're going to have to go through the full legislative process. We're going to have to get support from House, from Senate, and from the executive branch to see this through. So I think we need to take the process to the point where we could say, we could stand on it and say, yep, we recommend this. I anticipate it would, engage the stakeholders. So, interview these agencies if we're talking to them, interview, others that might be impacted or involved. But again, that could be the level of how the task force wants to go. If, certain members have a few ones they are in particular want to work at, they may go do the homework. They may investigate to a point where they can come back and fully be persuasive to the whole task force that this is what we want to do.
Quick follow-up,
Go ahead,
Mr.
Senator.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I look at thank you for that answer. And when I look at something like number 10, eliminate Board of Tax Appeals, and I'm looking at their mission is a way for the public to bring appealed tax assessments. I'm just curious, how did some of these land on this list, and were they a part of that process?
Representative Ehlers.
Thank you, Chairman Lakey and Senator Summerroth. So this list is early stage discussion point. So it has not gone through the whole process. Maybe, earlier in the slides are a little farther down the process than later in the slides, but they have not gone through the full process. So some of these, like this one in particular, are just through conversations I've had and industry experience. I think one point that's not on here is, if we're moving some responsibilities, if it's no longer necessary, then we don't need to do that. Maybe the agency's outlived its use. If there's something like the Board of Tax Appeals, where does that go? And can another group do it more efficiently? And so I think those are some of the questions we'd have to ask and answer, particularly for something like that.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Ehlers, co-chair. I have some that just pop out that I just want to talk about, but I'm not going to. I'm going to resist. What I think might be a good idea is if before the next meeting, we could put together, everyone can just send you their ideas, and we just have a list of things that we want to look at when it comes to agencies reducing FTPs, some questions that we ask about each agency to just kind of screen the agencies to begin with. So, are they using all their FTPs? I don't know. I'm sure the committee can come up with about 50 questions, but some kind of a process, because you could spend the rest of session and the rest of committees talking about all these, and we all have an opinion. And if we're just going to merge, maybe some of the questions could be, are we going to merge just to consolidate? Or if we're going to do that, just some kind of a process is what I think what the senator was getting at too. So maybe if we can send you something, and we can have a checkbox for each agency, and if it looks good on paper with all the check marks kind of being on one side or the other, then maybe those are the ones we focus on, because this could open up a can of worms. We could be a full-time committee. We don't want to do that.
Cans of worm and cans of cherries.
And I'm with the senator. The first one, that one jumped out at me too. The tax appeals, I've seen it in action. I've seen it work. It's for the little guy. It's an independent agency. I was like, why that one? But I'm not going to get into the conversations today.
Thanks, Representative Scott. Representative Ehlers, go ahead and respond.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Blakey and Representative Scott. This is great. That is exactly what I'm looking for here in bringing this forward, is let's find a way through screening questions or whatnot to prioritize. Because this could take a long time to go through all these. To use more analogies, right? We cast a wide net, caught a lot of fish, and now let's figure out a way how we can select which ones we want to examine further. So very happy to do that, to take input and maybe create some sort of screen to let the ones rise up that we want to examine more in depth. Great idea.
Thanks, Representative. Representative Manwaring.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Representative Ehlers, a couple of questions. Obviously, you've stated this, you expect this to be a multi-year process, and I think that's obvious with the amount of work that would be here. A couple of questions. So the low-hanging fruit, you have on here that the governor's office will you just clarify what that means? Because I think moving forward, maybe we ought to request at least a summary from the governor's office on each of these so we get their perspective. And then just kind of a second part of the process, at least with the STEM Action Center, you identified that Representative Horman, I believe, was working with them already. So for those that have already had a legislator that are working on this, is the intent that we just get, the DOGE committee to sort of sanction that when there already has someone working on it? Or what's the intent with someone when we already know there's somebody kind of taking that on?
Representative Ehlers.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Lakey and Representative Manwaring. Good questions. Regarding the first one, happy to continue coordinating with the governor's office in terms of like summaries, and they provided some of that. Some of these low-hanging fruit have just come through conversations where the executive branch feels comfortable putting these forward and talking with us about that, and I'm happy to work to compile summaries with that so we can understand their perspective on it. Regarding, some of our colleagues that may be already working on this, I think that's great and, glad they're working on these things. I think the idea is to kind of put it under the DOGE umbrella with sort of the DOGE stamp on it and move forward. Happy to have, let us recommend it, but happy to have that our colleague continue pushing it forward and, carrying it with the backing sort of the task force as well. I think it gives it another emphasis, I guess, behind it to help move it forward in the process.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Bjerke.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair and Representative Ehlers. Thinking about something similar I'd done in my past life and thinking about some of the agencies, and there's all kinds of good ideas out there, and there's always somebody that says we should just do it this way, and if they just listen to me. So maybe at a first blush, would it be beneficial to maybe seek some advice from the agencies as to what their ideas are? If they were giving kind of a benchmark of, this is about efficiencies, cost cutting, whatever. What would your suggestions be? We may have some people that self-report that they've already been talking with other agencies and they think that this would be a good idea. Is that something we might be able to pursue as just maybe get some ideas from those folks?
Representative Ehlers.
Yeah, Chairman Lakey and Senator Bjerke, yes, great idea. I think it comes back to our discussion of prioritizing, right? Like we could go talk to all 225 and take forever to get their ideas, but there may be some we say, let's go talk and let's engage them. We were attempting to do some of that with the DOGE portal, which we appreciate. I think we've gotten some state employees and some that are part of these agencies providing us some ideas, which I think is great. But yeah, take it to the next level with conversations with these actual stakeholders would be good once we identify maybe the ones we want to start with first and talk to.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, Co-Chair Ehlers, I think I'm going to share that DOGE portal on my Twitter. And I'll ask him which agencies and give us all the secret information. So we'll see what we can get.
Thanks, Representative.
That's great.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Co-Chair Ehlers, you're welcome to come back up, and you can adjourn if you want, since it's still your turn, or I can do it, whatever. Okay.
All right, thank you, Co-Chair, for handling that portion. Appreciate all this input. And appreciate the input of the public on the DOGE portal. We're going to keep working through those as well and address those. And really appreciate the interest from stakeholders, from the public, and others. Appreciate the good work of this task force as well. This was just to get our wheels turning and moving forward. Senator Lakey, if you want to add any closing remarks, and then we'll adjourn.
Thanks, Co-Chair. I agree with all of that. I appreciate all the input that we received from the committee and the ongoing public input. I think perhaps at the next meeting, it might be worthwhile to have a little bit of time for public comment as well. We kind of sprinkle that throughout along with the portal. So that's just my one other thought. And again, thanks everybody for their participation.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds great. We'll add that to the agenda. Also give our appreciation to our staff, to LSO, for all the work that they're doing on this. And that's one thing we can also remember as task force members is as we identify some of these high-level priorities, we can work with LSO and send them out to gather some of this data, such as FTPs and cost savings and any additional questions, overlap, the missions, the statutes that affect this. So let's keep that in mind. Committee, our next meeting is scheduled for October 23rd at 2 p.m. here in the Capitol. And with that, we will be adjourned.